I'm here with Vik Raya. Vik is a multifamily investor and entrepreneur, a medical professional, cardiologist, has a fascinating story. So, Vik, welcome.
Hey, Greg, thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. So, let's talk about your journey. What did you do before you got into real estate? And then what inspired you to start investing in real estate?
I'm not supposed to be on this kind of recording or any kind of stage. I should be in a cath lab somewhere, putting in a stent, or you're taking someone out of heart failure right now. I had no intention of going to real estate. I wanted to be a physician for many years. It was a lifelong dream, a goal. In growing up in the South Asian Indian background, you had three choices, Greg. You're either a doctor, you're a lawyer, or you're a loser. And so it was quite limited, right? But that being said, no, I actually started falling in love with it. It seemed to make sense. I liked the fact that there was some science and some technicality involved, but there's a human component. And so I was like, okay, how do I mix data with, personal relationships? And I'm like, okay, this is cool. And then as I was studying it, it was also a challenge, we're all like sort of alphas. We're all like type A, and we're like, hey, how do I achieve these big goals? And I'm like, all right, man, getting into being a doctor was a big thing. And I was the first in my family. And so I really went for it. And then once I got into it, it was like, man, I thought the world is like mine to take over. And, I can really thrive in that environment. And so then I studied cardiology because I was like, all right, how do I take that to the next level? And one of the reasons why I studied cardiology was because I had six people, Greg, in my family who died of heart attacks.
Wow.
And my father, and my son's first year birthday, he collapsed in front of me because of heart issues. And I was like, man, I got to figure this out. So that's why it was so meaningful for me to study cardiology. And I know, as a pragmatist, I'm like, oh, these people make money, they high income, they probably live a good lifestyle. That's also a good reason to do it. And so I went into it, and while I was training, I noticed the mentors who were trying to teach me, like we call them attendings in our profession. These guys, man, they were like hustling, but not hustling in like, hey, they're in a good way. They were like sniffing out anything that could create reimbursements, and they would do whatever it took to like increase their revenue. And they were like forsaking their families. They were putting themselves at health risk because they were going all in and doing things. And then I even had some people doing things that were not even legal. And all of this came like my world came crashing down because I idealized, I had put these people on a pedestal, and I thought this whole profession was just it was going to be something amazing. So that reality check really, took me for a loop. And then, so when I started practicing, I came back to DC. My wife and I, she's a physician. I'm a physician. We settled down. This is where I trained at Georgetown. So I was like, let's come back to this area. And what I noticed was, my income was, I'll be honest, my salary first year, Greg, was $225,000 in DC, which is a very expensive town to live in. So I was like, man, something's got to give. And maybe, yes, I thought, as I work my way up the ladder and become a partner, whatever, it will improve. But I needed something outside of medicine to really live the lifestyle I wanted. And I was on call like every fourth night. I was every Tuesday. I would not sleep because I would be buzzed every night in the phone call. And then, so I enjoyed what I did. I cared about my patients, but the quality of life was not something I knew I could sustain for 20, 30, 40 years. So I already started making plans, read all the books, the Kiyosaki's, the Jim Collins, all these things. And I knew I needed to create a separate income outside of medicine, just for safety, for, mindset, just for freedom. And so I started doing single family homes. And initially I tried wholesaling. For those in the audience who remember this thing, it's essentially trying to get a deal under contract and then flipping that contract.
Assigning
so
the
I went to my
contract to an end
local.
buyer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So here you are, a medical professional. You could probably pay cash, but you started with wholesaling. Why did you start with wholesaling as opposed to buying an income producing property or something like that?
My wife gave me a condition. If I ever use our own income, or if I use our name to sign on a loan, that would not be very good for our relationship. And it was almost like she forced me to be creative, right? So I had to use creative financing.
She knows you better than you know you.
Yeah. And so she was like, I think she was doing that to protect our family, but in a way, she spurred me to go beyond like the easy way to get started. And so I essentially had started like just like any of your clients who probably, who don't have like a big income to back them up. And I couldn't use the fact that I'm a cardiologist to even qualify for the loans. And so it was challenging.
So
So
how
I
did you learn
tried.
about wholesaling? Did you find it? Where did you find the information? How did you learn? And then how did you start finding properties?
So one of the things I did learn early on is if you want to learn something, either you can pay the ignorance tax and do trial and error, or you can pay a mentor and try to collapse time. So I went to now there's meetups, now there's online and Facebook groups and all that. That none of that existed in 2012. So I went to something old school called RIAs, REIA, Real Estate Investment Associations, which were essentially sort of hangouts where real estate people would get together because we were like sort of shunned by the normal society. So this is where we bonded, we hung out. Sometimes there's some paid courses. They brought in speakers,
So
and
you went
that's
to the
where I got my
DC
first
RIA.
start.
Did you start with the DC RIA?
The DC RIA.
Yeah, they're still going today.
They're still going today. And there's a guy named Sherman Ragland, I remember, and he's like, I looked up to him. I'm like, man, this guy has a Viper. Man, he's like flipping deals in Baltimore. I was like, man, this is exciting. So yeah, I found myself now at the DC RIA. I started learning about wholesaling, which I think is an interesting strategy. It seemed sexy on the outside. People were making like several $100,000 a year. I was like, wow. The problem was it's very labor and time intensive. And so in the middle of my clinic, in my lunch hour, I would try to fax all these offers to brokers and try to win these deals. And I realized it was an impossible mission at that point. So then I was like, all right, probably rehabs make more sense, but I couldn't afford to do any of the rehabs in our area in DC, Virginia, Maryland. So then I remember my father, and I grew up in Atlanta. My father's still in Atlanta. He's an engineer turned, businessman turned like, strip mall gas station owner. And he was like, he had some free time. I was like, hey, Dad, let's do this together. So we formed a company and we started buying these small little 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom homes in like rural parts of Atlanta. And we started doing fix and flips. And the way we got the first one is literally like credit cards, hard money loans, and, creative financing. What is it called? I think
subject to.
Subject to things. And that's how we started and then we started getting some traction. And, my first house, we bought it for $20,000. I was sweating bullets. And we ended up taking that $20,000, eventually selling it for $80,000 after all the renovations and the appreciation.
And were these like just MLS deals, or were you marketing directly?
Yeah, MLS deals, and then a little bit of HUD homes and all. I would go to all these like sort of boot camp, ghetto webinars and seminars. There's a guy named Larry Goins, Goins, and he had this course that I was like, it's called Filthy Riches. And it was about buying like $1,000 to $10,000 homes and then flipping them for like $20,000. I was like, that's the kind of thinking I had, because I was like, all right, that's how I need to scrape and do this. All the while, my goal was just to practice full time, and I was like starting to become more prominent in my medical practice. I was ascending the ranks, and in fact, they were ready to sort of give me like the de facto leadership after the main guy retired, and that's the route I was heading. But I was like, even I was seeing that, and I was like, the type of medicine I was also doing started bothering me, Greg. So what I was doing was essentially, if you came to me, Greg, and you had chest pain and you had things, I'd quote unquote fix your chest pain. I'd figure out the blockage, or I'd figure out what happened. I'd give you a medication. I'd give you a test. I'd give you a diagnostic. Instead of that, I was like, what if I figured out why Greg is having all these issues upstream? He's overweight. He probably eats too many Twinkies at night. He drinks, a fifth every night, perhaps all these lifestyle issues. And so if I corrected that, perhaps can I fix his underlying issues? So anyway, I had a passionate dream to maybe do a clinic on my own. And so I started getting trained in functional medicine, which is reversing disease essentially, and then optimizing humans. And I was like, oh, cool. But that's not going to be paid by insurance. So I realized I had to take a risk and do a cash-based wellness clinic in Tyson's. And so what I needed to do was create an income stream outside of cardiology that would allow me to take this entrepreneurial risk. And that's what really drove me to go take my real estate, which was a little fledgling real estate thing, to the next level. And so I realized that, me and my father, after accumulating whatever we did, and we did the Burr method, right? Like, was a buy, renovate, refinance, move on, whatever the acronym is. We had 30 homes after 2 years. But we had almost no equity because we just kept rolling everything in, and the cash flow was very minimal. Plus, we had hard money loans. So anyway, we consolidated everything, and I actually gave it to my dad. I'm like, hey, you can cash me out. This is not for me. And I learned there's a guy who flew in from Boston, and he was talking about buying big deals, 100-unit deals, using other people's money. And he used a word that I've never heard before, Greg. It's called syndication. I was like, wow. It's very sexy, but it sounds very illegal too.
Was that Dave Lindahl?
Dave Lindahl, man.
Yeah. The godfather of real estate syndication and multifamily investing. That was one of the first books I read.
Sherman happened to invite him to one of our RIAs, and I was like, And I just, sometimes you can't act on something right away, but you file it away for later. But it never left my brain because it was like, it just seemed so compelling. And back then, I mean, now, I drive down my street. I can run in, I can run over a syndicator here and there, left and right. They're all over the place. They proliferated. Now, that being said, the top quality syndicators are far and few between, but everyone's quote unquote a syndicator. Everyone calls it GP now. So in 2013, 2014, this is the kind of thinking I was having. And then finally, once I decided to let go of the single family thing and try to do something bigger, because I was like, this is not going to retire me. And I made a proclamation when I started cardiology, which was in 2011. I go, and I was like 33 at the time. I was like, if I'm still practicing by the age of 40, something went terribly wrong. I declared that to the world. And I had no business declaring that because I had no way to get out of cardiology. It was just something I set an intention, and I was like, we'll figure it out. And in fact, I had uncles laughing at me. I had cousins laughing at me. I had people like thinking, oh man, this guy's a joker. In fact, I even told my friend, I remember my sister-in-law, I specifically remember incident where, like, hey, man, I'm doing this thing. She's like, you're going to fail. Don't even bother. And so it's interesting, Greg, as people try to do big things, their closest people around them actually challenge them and, in fact, discourage them. So it's almost like you got to protect. It's like a flame. You got to protect your goal, your dream inside your heart. And people are going to try to extinguish that flame, but until it really catches on fire, you have to protect it. And so I had to do that. And my wife, she didn't necessarily try to extinguish it, but she didn't necessarily try to encourage it either. She was sort of neutral because you're like, let's see where this pans out. As long as you don't mess up what we're our mortgage and our normal day-to-day life. Okay. I'll encourage you. But she was like, at some point, like, when is enough? Why are you sacrificing your free time for this? And that's what you had to do, nights and weekends, Greg. I remember that's when I became part of the tribe of 4:45. So 4:45 a.m. for a decade, I was getting up and I was squeezing a little hour for real estate at the beginning and at night, and then on the weekends. So while my friends were hanging out with their guys nights outs, trips, I was always studying, reading, listening, learning, and I'm just wondering what's the next step. And then, people like you came into my life, and people like Trevor, and like all these people who actually believed in what you're saying, and they gave you ideas and insights. And so, I was just chugging along. And so, going back to the story of the syndication. So I at that point, I knew that this is going to be a big endeavor and I would need help. And so I went to my wife is actually the one who set me and my business partner up. So she noticed that I was interested in this stuff, and there's a guy in her hospital that had similar interest. I like to do obstacle course races like Tough Mudder and Spartans, and so did this guy. And then I went to the daycare. I noticed that same guy was there, and his kid was actually starting to become friends with my kid at the daycare. I was like, oh, this is interesting. And then his wife is a rheumatologist or an autoimmune doctor. And so is my wife, and they were friends. I'm like, man, this is interesting. And then he goes, yeah, I do real estate. And you're a physician, and I'm a physician. I do real estate. Hey. And so we came together, and I made him an indecent proposal. I was like, hey, I know you're comfortable. I know you got a little bit of rentals and you're just chilling as a doctor, but would you be interested in doing something bigger? And he's like, sure. And so we talked about forming this company, a multifamily syndication company, to do big deals. And So that's the origin of Viking Capital in 2015. The interesting thing was it was not supposed to be called Viking. We thought, hey, we're Indian. Let's call it something cool. Maybe Cardamom Capital, Saffron Capital, you know. And then he goes, dude, that's so like loser. Like no one's gonna invest in that kind of stuff, right? They'll think we're like a grocery store company. Okay, no, okay, fine. I need something masculine, some testosterone. Let's call it Viking Capital. And so that's how we got our name, Viking Capital. And so at this point, we had zero assets, zero idea what we're doing, but we knew we wanted to do it. So we went to this boot camp, learned a little bit of underwriting, learned about things. We're like, all right, we're going to go do it. We happened to run into another group that was about 2 to 3 years ahead of us. They already had done 2 or 3 deals, and they were in the Atlanta area, which we felt comfortable with. So at this point, they asked us, hey, do you want to raise capital for us? And the only reason they asked us, not because we were amazing or anything, they just heard the word doctor, and they thought money, and we're surrounded by money. We didn't think we're surrounded by money. And I was at this point, I didn't tell a single person that I was doing real estate at that point. I was embarrassed. I was ashamed to talk about real estate in front of my physician friends.
And you hadn't raised any capital from outside investors to this point yet, right? Just using hard money,
credit cards. And in fact, I made so many stupid mistakes, Greg. I was really so desperate to get investors for the single family stuff that I Googled accredited investors. Where do I find them? And then there's a website that says, hey, we have a list of accredited investors. Just sign up. You pay like a couple $100. Okay, I got a list. And they're like, oh, so you contact them. So I started going down this list and contacting them. Mr. Green, Mr. White, like Mr. Gray. I'm like, oh, very interesting names. Okay, sure. And then I did a Western Union wire transfer. And then they said, as soon as we get the wire transfer, we'll fund your deal. Of course, it was a scam. So, I mean, like, I lost a couple $100 doing that. So I'm like, I definitely had some bruises figuring this out. So now we're in Orlando at this boot camp. We met this group. They're active in Atlanta. They actually have a live deal. And so we go for it. But they say, hey, to work with us, you have to raise $500,000. I'm like, dude, that blows my mind. I can't even raise $50K. So we said, hey, how about 250? And they're like, trust me, you need to do 500. We're like, all right, we'll do 250. And if we can do 500, we'll try. So that's when we started calling our buddies. We didn't know what we're doing. They had a deck for us. We didn't even understand half of it, but you
never even told anybody you were doing real estate, none of your colleagues.
So, I mean, they heard a little bit, but nothing, no one really knew what we're doing. And so at that point, we would get a question from an interested investor. And then we would call those people, and they would tell us what to say, and then we'd say it back to them. And somehow we raised $750,000 for our first raise. And so we're like, okay, this is pretty cool. And when we closed, we got a little bit of a check because we were part of the team. And then we're like, all right. And then the next thing that those guys were like, we thought we'd have a year to like relax and then do another deal next year. Within 3 months, I had another deal. We're like, dude, we can't. I mean, we're not even ready to. So at that point, we started taking it a little more seriously. We studied, we trained. We actually went down, checked out the property, and then we raised 1.2 for the second deal. And then at that point, we're done. We're like, hey, we exhausted our resources. We only have a few friends that are physicians. And they're like, actually, that owner has another deal right after this. And then he told me something that I'll always remember. When times are when you're in the zone, when times are hot and when there's momentum, don't ever slow down. And then when there's cold times, you'll be wishing that you did these kind of things. So this is that time. I go, okay, I will go after this deal with you, the third deal in a row, but on one condition. If you help me and my buddy Ravi get our own deal. And they're like, sure, no problem. We'll definitely help you get another deal. Don't worry. We definitely want you to be successful outside of us. Oh, sure. Okay. So then now we raised like 2.3 on that one. And so we're like, okay, feeling pretty good.
Was this all from the same network, basically?
Yeah, same network. And then that group essentially just played us. I mean, it was in their best interest to keep us as a subsidiary and never try to promote us to doing things. And so at that point, we're like, you know what? We're going to do things on our own. And we got coaches, we got mentors, and then we did a launch party, which is one of the things that I think very few people in the country do. So at that time, there's a fledgling car company started by a young man from Australia. I'm not from Australia, South Africa, named Elon. And he had a company called Tesla at that point that no one really heard about. And we ended up doing a launch party in the Tysons, which is our Beverly Hills of DC area. And it was for our company, Viking Capital. And it was really well received. Everyone was like, man, you guys are sort of on fire. And so we had a little bit of buzz about us. And then but then we deflated because for the next year and a half, we couldn't find a deal, even though we were on our own. And we
so let's go back
brokers.
to this. So what was the Tesla and Elon connection? He did a launch party, so you just kind of benchmarked that. Is that what you were saying?
No, I'm just saying like no one had heard of Elon, no one knew Tesla, but it had sort of a buzz about them, and we wanted to create brand association.
Okay.
And so I had heard some people say, hey, sometimes people throw corporate events at like these kind of exclusive kind of places, and so we asked them, and they were dying for publicity, and we told them, hey, I can bring 50 to 100 high income physicians. They're like, oh, sure. And so at that point we had the exclusive. We didn't have to pay for it even. It was free. They gave it to us for free.
So they brought Teslas in, and you did a big.
We got to test drive the Teslas. We catered the little event. We put our Viking Capital logo next to the Tesla logo, and it was amazing.
That's awesome.
I doubt I can pull this off now, but that was the kind of capabilities we had back then when it was a younger company. So, and these are the kind of inflection moments in our company's trajectory and in my own real estate journey.
Yeah. So it's interesting. A couple of things there. So, and that's what I want to get into. So we did an interview with Ravi and Judah and got real deep on operations, but your role has been very different. So you and I met in February of 2020 at your office, the Vitology Clinic in Tyson's Corner. And your goal then was to start doing more deals and expand your physical locations around the world. And then the first thing I said to you was, why do you want to do that?
Yeah. So when me and you met, Greg, so we'll fast forward. So that was let me tell you about our first deal, and then I'll fast forward to where when we met. So after a year and a half of searching for a property, Greg, and we had strong broker relationships. I mean, we were talking to these brokers all the time. We were visiting, but they would not trust us because we're newbies. And then finally, we're in a best and final for a deal. And this was a 118 unit deal in South Atlanta, C-class property, C area. And we didn't win the deal, unfortunately. So a group from New York won the deal. And they were ready to close. We found out moments before they were ready to close that there was a murder on the property. And at that point, they backed out because they're like, oh, our equity doesn't like this. We're out. The brokers then said, hey, you guys were next in line. You guys want it? Yes or no? I need 24. You have 24 hours to let us know. Others we're going down the list. And so those 24 hours, it literally had the fate of our company in our hands because we got our first deal, but it's not the kind of deal we thought we would get, right? There's a murder. We have to decide. In fact, I didn't even tell my wife, or he told his wife because it was just too inflammatory at that point. But we called the police department. We did a crime check. We understood the area. We talked to the property manager, and we realized this was a one-off. This was an anomaly. This is not a trend in the area. And so we just prayed, and we rolled the dice and said, okay, we'll take it. Let's go. And we thought, okay, we'll just boost up security. We'll put some cameras in there. Let's do something. But that was one of the best deals we did. And then the property next door, a year later, was a fractured condo unit that also had dead dogs, had a prostitute issues, but it was bringing down the value of our property, even though our property was doing well. So it took us a year, and we couldn't get a loan because it was all fractured condos, zero occupancy. And so between like begging and borrowing from friends, family, and piecing that deal together, which was 62 units, we put it together. We had 180 at that point. All in, we put in $8 million. And 2 years after buying that first deal and this deal together, we sold it for 13. And at that point, I was like, we did it. $5 million profit for us and our investors. At that point, I had the balls to let my cardiology practice know, hey, you know what? I may come back, but for now, I'm going to move on. So that was 2018, December, and I was 39 years old at that point. And back to my declaration, hey, if I'm still practicing by the age of 40, something went. So I was able to leave traditional cardiology, open up my clinic in Tysons where we met, and I thought that was my dream. My dream was to run this clinic, and I thought that was going to make me that was my claim to fame. I was going to have 30 of these all over the world. I told you about, I wanted Dubai, Hong Kong. I wanted this complex thing, and I thought that real estate's a cute little thing on the side that it will just keep chugging along. But this is my legacy. And a couple of things happened. I learned a couple of concepts, Greg. One of my mentors taught me ELF and HALF. ELF is easy, lucrative, and fun. HALF is hard, annoying, lame, and frustrating. And man, and my the Vitology clinic is probably a level 5 opportunity, and I was like a level 3 entrepreneur. Viking is a level 10 opportunity, and I was still, and I was, and in that setting, I was more of a level 5 entrepreneur. And so I didn't realize all these things, and then I didn't really understand how to run business operating systems like Traction or Vern Harnish or like, eMyth or anything like that. I didn't understand how to like do who, not how. I didn't understand leverage. I didn't understand systems and SOPs. And so I ran this clinic like bootleg, and my overhead was crazy high. Now, that being said, clinically, I was a success. Clinically, I was an all-star. I mean, people were like praising me. I was in the newspapers. I was, asked to speak everywhere. But financially, it was compared to the real estate, man, this was a little more of a challenge. And it was because of my business model and because my time was split. I was trying to do SpaceX and Tesla at the same time without having a team to do either one. And so that was the challenge. And so at that point, the pandemic happened, and it was one of the best things that ever happened to me, because at that point I had to shut my clinic. Now, we were profitable. We were a 7-figure clinic in Vitology, and the real estate was just chugging along. But when the moment the pandemic happened, I just had a realization. I talked to some folks. I talked to my trusted advisors, and then I was like, and the third thing that happened at that time was physicians all over the country were like, "Hey, I love what you're doing. You're doing real estate. You're doing your kind of futuristic clinic. Can you coach me? Can you talk to me?" And so I had another thing on my plate. Now I had 3 things on my plate. I was like, all right, maybe I'll pull all 3 of them off. But that's when when someone told me, like, "Hey, what's your zone of genius and what's your zone of excellence?" My zone of excellence was the clinic. Yeah, I really did a good job there. It was good, but it wasn't phenomenal. It wasn't outstanding. I was in my zone of genius in real estate and my zone of genius in coaching. And so I made a tough decision. I decided to back off on the clinic and made it fully virtual and mostly automated. And I doubled down on real estate. And the moment we did that, we did $100 million real estate in our first year. And we just went to the races. And now we're at $750 million of real estate that we control. And, we've done close to 5,000 doors. We have a all-star team of 25, people. Me and Ravi are now at the position we're trying to become more owners and not operators. We're going to hire a CEO next year. We have an advisory board being formed. And on the coaching side, that was just a fledgling thing in 2020. I was just thinking and just starting taking one-on-one clients. Now, we're approaching multi 7 figures in the coaching program. And the beautiful thing about all of this, Greg, is now I can take 3-week vacations, for a month off to go to Italy, 3 weeks off to go to Greece and Turkey, a week off here to go to Egypt, and my company's run without me and I make more money.
Yeah, that's awesome. So let's talk about what put you in that position. When we first met, I don't think you'd raised more than, I don't even know how much it was, not even 20 million bucks at that point, totally.
Yeah. I think we've raised, we 2020, probably maybe up to 40 million, maybe at that point.
Yeah. And this was February 2020.
We've raised 250 million at this point.
250 million. We met in February 2020. You'd raised about 40 million. You had about 100 million or so, plus or minus, assets under management, and no team. It was just basically the 2 of you.
And
Robbie
two other guys. That's it. It's a four-person team.
Yeah. Robbie was still practicing somewhat. You're still practicing. So let's talk about the capital raising, how you went from, because it's only been a little over 3 years that you went from that 40 million to raising, a total of about 250 million, like instantly, and what that looked like, and, the systems and the teams that you had to put in place to do that.
Yeah. I started becoming a better business person because I started studying business and operations and learning that skill set, because that's what's missing. Most if you remember the quadrant, the cash flow quadrant, you have your E, S, B, and I. A lot of these S's, these doctors, lawyers, accountants, engineers, etc., they think they know more than they do, and their ego gets in the way of them actually being successful. And they don't learn these critical skill sets in order to run an efficient business. And then once you learn them, you can run any business. I mean, at this point, we're looking at business outside of real estate and private equity and other things. But
and
it's
to be fair, you're
set.
not taught any of this in medical school. You're not taught leadership.
No.
You're not taught business skills. You're not taught financial management.
No.
I have a lot of friends that are, and clients that are, medical professionals that are like, hey, I'm great at what I do, but I'm a terrible business person and money manager. I have no clue.
Yeah. And the other thing is the scarcity mindset, like sometimes you have to invest in skills, invest in people, invest in, projects. And they're more worried about the investment than the ROI at the back end. And then the delayed gratification is another thing, right? People buy the doctor car, the doctor house, and they want the doctor lifestyle, but they realize it's actually capping them versus freeing them.
So let's go from you never raised capital out, from anybody, and then you started raising capital. So how did you scale that, and how did you get comfortable with, raising capital from other people, outside of your initial networks?
So thankfully, I have a pretty large network, and so I was able to tap a lot of that, and and it keeps growing, which is great. So, and one of the things I had to get over was going from keeping what I do to myself to letting everyone know what I do. That was a huge decision, intentional, and also from my wife thinking I was bragging about what I do to I was educating. Like it's like, in our culture, we try not to, everyone likes to keep their business to themselves sometimes. And I'm one of the few people in this high income earner society that's like, what? Hey, here's what I do. You want to join it? Great. If you want me to just advise you in any way, I'd love to help you. But this kind of open, transparent life is what allowed me to then to like allow people, because I realized that for me to grow and scale, if I can help other people invest and grow their income, that I'm being generous, and because I'm generous, I get to have some of that too. So it's like that's the way to scale. And so you have to let people know and what you do and share it with the world. Number 2, I had to get comfortable with social media. Number 3, we went from 5063B to 5063C. And for those of you who don't know, it's an SEC designation, meaning you're going from friends and family kind of funding, which requires, most of them to be accredited, but not everyone, to making sure you only take accredited investors, but in return, they give you the permission to broadcast broadly. And, growing up, all my mentors said, oh, never do that. Stay in the friends and family. No, don't. And it was almost like you have to break from tradition, break from your coaching and do something different. And that's when you sort of outgrow people. And I noticed I started outgrowing certain, groups, mentors, folks, and that's a good sign. So in people's evolution, every time they get to a plateau or a level, and to go to the next level, you either had to transform yourself, you need to have a new idea, or you need to get a new team member, or something has to change for you to achieve that next level. So my quote is every level has its own devil, right? So you got to overcome those. Yeah. And then, the other common phrase that people say is what gets you here won't get you there, right?
Right.
So both of those are true. And so I've had to shed team members where, they can't grow beyond, because they're capped. They're like, oh, this is what Viking is. They can't see the future Viking I see. And I've had to keep reinventing Viking 5, 6, 7, 20, 50 times. And that's the role of a visionary versus an integrator or the rest of the team. So, and for those of you who are listening, realize that there's this nice, a dance that happens. There's always the founder or the CEO or the visionary, and that person may not be specific in details perhaps, but they really can drive the mission, big relationships, big capital, big decisions. And then they need a right hand for them to be successful. And that's what I didn't have in my clinic, the Vitology clinic. In my other two businesses, I have a right hand in my Limitless MD coaching company. I have a right hand in Viking Capital. And that's why I think I'm so successful in those companies compared to the other one, because I finally figured it out. You need these things. And the second thing that really helped me grow and scale, as I mentioned, obviously the going to crowdfunding and broader and social media, was a business operating system. So we run Traction in both our companies, or a version of Traction we call Pinnacle. And that has allowed us to 6x a couple of times, in the last few years. And that's why we became, the Inc. 5000, or this side, Inc. 5000, Forbes list, all these kind of things. The other thing was hiring, one of the things is marketing and media. So it's a skill set that I'm learning to develop, and I'm still developing, but learning to harness the power of an agency or a marketing specialist, and realizing you're not in the real estate game, you're in the marketing game. So whether I'm coaching or whether I'm selling investments, it doesn't matter. I'm still selling. So it's informing, it's value, it's providing value, and then it's providing opportunities, and then achieving what we call know, like, trust. And then the last one is know, like, trust, and invest. It's not just know, like, trust is great, but if you don't convert or sell or invest, then it's meaningless.
Yeah.
And so learning all these things, and then here's the next evolution where we're going is, at some point the agencies have too many clients. They don't have your best interest at heart. They're just trying to grow their agency, and bringing that in-house has been the next evolution for us. And so now I have in-house marketing for both my companies, and that has allowed us to go to the next level.
Yeah, and these are all the things that so what I want to really drive home to people. So number one, you said you had a big network. When we talked about how'd you start expanding outside and growing, you said, well, I'm lucky I had a big network. Well, that didn't just happen. You created that network. You went out, you created those relationships, you met people, and you built that network with investors and with brokers. One of your unique things is you'll go visit the broker, bring them a gift, so that they have they know you personally and have a different way of thinking of you when a deal comes around. And I think you do the same thing with some of your investors as well, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, I treat everyone like gold, because that's what they are to me. One, I want to add a tremendous amount of value. And even if it's not with me, I want to add value. Number two, so introductions, networking, meetings. Number two is, like you said, treat the brokers well, because the brokers control the deals. Probably 80% or 90% of most deals are done through brokers. And so, yes, you can try to call sellers, this and that, but use the Pareto's principle. 20% of the things get you 80% of the results. What are those things? Well, brokers are one. So you need to, we have strong broker relationships, and that's really helped us get deal flow. And then you need only two things to be successful in real estate: deals and capital. So the UDUC formula is what Viking follows: unlimited deals, unlimited capital. So how do we achieve
I add the third
goals?
expertise. Yeah. So you got three things. You got to have deals, cash flow, or capital, and you got to have expertise.
Right. That's true.
Yeah. And you can have one of those three, or a couple of those three, or all three, but to get yourself into deals, that's what I teach. One of those three, just like you did when you started. You had no expertise, you had no deals, you could raise the capital. So that's how you got started in the business. You didn't know anything, but you knew how, you didn't even know you could raise money, but they told you, hey, you're surrounded by doctors. They have money just like you. And that's so funny. You're in that world. You know that doctors make a lot of money. They're always looking for other opportunities. It didn't even occur to you to think that, man, I could raise capital right here where I go to work every single day.
Absolutely. So
it's amazing. So that's your journey there in terms of that. So some of the other things you did in fundraising. So you used to do dinners, right? You do investor dinners, and then you moved to doing like conferences and events.
Yeah. Investor dinners, conferences, events. We did an immersion event where we invited so many people. We've done charity galas where we've had like Cirque du Soleil performers, and we had an auction, and it was really high end. We had a masquerade ball. I mean, we've done some really nice things for our investors, and people view Viking Capital now we're more of the premium offering. We're more of a luxury, quote unquote, syndicator. We're not, Joe Schmo on the street. And I intentionally did that because I have to distinguish myself from my competitors. And so the other thing is, we've been giving investor gifts for the last 8 years. Very few investment companies do that. So these small touches allow us to have almost a 65% reinvestment rate.
That's awesome. So I want to bring this full circle, because back in February of 2020, it was you and Ravi, And we sat down in that co-working space in DC. Maybe it was March after we started. We met in February. Maybe we got started in March. I can't remember. I'd have to look back. It was during that time frame. Here we are 3.5 years later. 700 million in assets under management, raised $250 million, what, 5,000 doors, whatever you've got. And I remember that first meeting, and we sat down and we talked about everything you just said. So we talked about, number one, there's you and Ravi. You had a couple of people, maybe somebody was leaving and left you with one at the time, and you guys didn't even know what your roles were. So the first thing, and do you remember the org chart that you created? I can't remember if you or Ravi. Do you still have that?
Yeah, I don't somewhere, but yeah, the interesting thing was there was a little bit of a tension, a natural tension between two leaders in the company, right? And even though I felt like I was a CEO and I was a visionary, I couldn't say it because it was all this like, you wanted to make the other person feel validated, and it actually slowed us down because of that non-clarity.
I'm looking in my folder now. I want to find that org chart that you created when we met, because one of you, I can't remember who it was, one of you had it, and we sat down. So anyways, we sat down, we looked at the org chart. First thing we did was we said, after I got to know you guys and we spent a little time, number one, what's the vision? First thing we did, we looked at your org chart. What was the vision? And we talked about the brand. That was number one. What do you want Viking to be? And then, you talked about that exclusive luxury boutique kind of brand that's just very different. The next thing we talked about was, what do you need to look like, as an organization? Your brand, what do you need to look like? Who do you need to become? What are your roles? And who do you need to surround yourself with? What is your team? And you guys had that org chart, we laid it out to get you to $1 billion. That was the org chart that we had. Here's the team you need to look like to get to $1 billion and to raise $300 million. And then we talked about you guys, and I found out you're the CEO, Vik, this is your role. This is what you need to be. Ravi, you're the COO. This is your role. This is what you need to be. You're still partners, you're still co-founders, but you guys can't work together doing the same thing. You got to go with your strengths and your sweet spot and your zone of genius. And your zone of genius is the big visionary, out there selling, raising capital, promoting the brand, where Ravi's an operations guy. He's in the numbers, he's in the details, he's in, the operations. So we clarified those two roles. And then we started embarking on filling in the rest of the holes in terms of who you needed to become as a company to move forward. And I don't know if you remember that, but everything you just said, all of that. And then the next thing I said was, quit doing 506Bs. You've got to go 506C. And you had that one last raise you were doing where you had a few of those, unaccredited investors in there. And then that's when the next deal, you're like 506C from here on out. And then you went from that point on out, started using Facebook advertising so that you could do general solicitation. And then the next conversations were, well, this doesn't make any sense. You got to bring this whole thing in-house. So, I mean, it's really interesting to look now, 3.5 years later, that all you did was follow the plan.
Absolutely. And
you put a vision in place,
the thing is,
and then you execute.
Everyone knows the plan, but very few people can execute on the plan.
Right.
And so, now that I've seen some of my coaching clients, I'm like, hey, here's what it takes for you to get there. Let me spoon feed it to you, but you got to do it. And it's crazy where either they get bored of it, they don't believe in it, it takes them too long to execute on it. And that's why I think ideas, plans, intentions, goals, visioneering, all that's great, but it's the daily grind execution with that North Star in your eyesights that keeps you on focus so you can course correct along the way. That's the critical part.
Yeah. And you guys, it's so much fun to work with, companies and teams like you guys, because we would lay it out, you would go do it, and then you'd go, okay, what's next? And then you would go do it. And now, as you've evolved in all your other businesses and surrounded yourself with other coaches and mentors in different spaces, and you're doing it, it's this is for some courses that people are taking. They've got the skills, they've got the knowledge, they've heard other stories, they know exactly how to do it. The differentiator, just like you said, I was lucky I had a great network. No, you created that network. You were lucky you met somebody at this event. Well, you went to the event. So none of this is luck. You create your own luck.
And I think for the people listening, at some point, you don't need to read any more books. You don't need to listen to any more podcasts. And if the person who you're working with has given you a game plan, just monomaniacally execute on it, and then follow your marching orders, and then come back for more. And if you need to tweak a course correct, sure. But the problem is people have a perverse form of procrastination by taking in too much knowledge. They try to go to more conferences and more books and more meetups and things, and no real traction is happening. And it looks like they're doing a lot of work, but they're not.
Yeah, that's awesome. So tell us, what's next for Vik Raya? What are the different things you're doing now? And what do you have to offer that can help people that, really resonate with your story and say, I want Vik to help me?
Yeah. At this point, what's next for us is, Viking Capital wise, I'm looking for a CEO to join us in the next 12 to 18 months. We're grooming people in-house, but we're also going to look outside as well, just to see. And the goal is really, I wanted to continue. We're at the point where we consistently do about 4, maybe 5 deals a year. I want to double that production volume to maybe 8 deals a year. We're exploring institutional partnerships while retaining the retail partnerships, and maybe have a parallel pathway. We're exploring at one. I told myself, again, because we were distracted. Another thing is not to get distracted with shiny objects. Create a goal of, hey, I'm going to be singularly focused on one offer, one asset, one avatar till $1 million or whatever that endpoint is for you. For us, it was one asset class to 1 billion. And then after that, we will consider diversifying. And so we're approaching 1 billion. It will probably happen in the next 12 months. We're thinking now either development or maybe a pref equity fund, a debt fund, or something else to pair alongside multifamily that's symbiotic, but still in the realm of what we do.
And remember what we said about that $1 billion goal? What was that
that's just
about?
We're just going to get started. That's just getting started.
That's where you begin.
Yeah.
A lot of people think the journey to 1 billion, just like a journey to a black belt, is the end goal. No, now you're ready to begin. Now you're ready to become.
Greg told me that's when you arrive. So I was like, all right. And so I already know that ahead of time. So I'm positioning ourselves for what does that next journey look like. From 1 to 2 will be a lot easier than from 0 to 1. That's for sure.
Yeah. 3.5 years to get to that 1, 4 years probably by the end of this year, to get to that 1 billion. And then, you'll double that, triple that, quadruple that exponentially in the next 3 years.
And then I feel like I love coaching. I love mentoring. I love taking people and seeing the best in them and then extracting it. And then between kicking their butt and then, pumping them up and then giving them tools, strategies, and tactics and none of it's like fluff. I've actually had to use this every step of what I'm doing. I've had to learn from multiple disciplines: health, medicine, real estate, business, finance, accounting, marketing, sales. I've had to learn it for everything I'm doing. So now at some point it's me paying it forward. And so that's I think, man, if money didn't matter to me at some point, I would still do this for the rest of my life. And so
that's your coaching program. So who's your ideal client for that? What does that look like?
So right now it's anyone in the medical profession. It doesn't have to be, but that's sort of who we've attracted at this point. But we have 3 tiers of programs now. So the first tier is it's essentially it's a 20-unit tycoon, or we call it MD tycoon. But essentially we help any person with 0 history or knowledge get in 12 weeks, get a 20-unit under contract. So that's level 1. Level 2 is a mastermind called a Freedom 5 Mastermind. We help these high-level entrepreneurs, physicians, etc., be part of an exclusive group, and we help them achieve the 5 freedoms. And that is financial, time, vitality, mindset, and geographic. They should be able to work from anywhere in the world. And part of that is, going away from their W-2s into more of a freedom lifestyle. And the final level of coaching is called Project Titan, where I get to work with people one-on-one, and we take them from wherever they are. Usually these people are, high 6 figures. Maybe they're hitting 7 figures at that point, and now they want to go to what's next. And we help answer what's next, whether that's financial scaling, business scaling, mindset scaling, and how do and more importantly than the money, it's the lifestyle. How do I live this like amazing lifestyle where I can work from anywhere in the world? I have teams working for me. I have multiple businesses, and I have free time with my family, and I have ridiculous level of health.
Yeah. And let's talk about the final thing, which is what all of this has given you, and to give back, the ability to give back in your own way. So let's talk a little bit about the philanthropic efforts that you're involved in, and how all of this, everything now, has given you that.
I mean, things like this are amazing. Like me and Ravi built a school in Bangladesh to help kids, because there was no school in that village. So we did. We're part of a lot of green energy initiatives. We have a Planet Tree Foundation that we're partnered with, Charity Water to help with water projects all over the world, solar/water projects as well. I mean, it's just fun. And then with my coaching, the next thing we're going to start doing is doing medical missions all over the world, and that way people can still do medicine for the passion of it, not because of the money. And so these are the things that inspire me, that want me, to get up out of bed and work hard. And you're never finished, as David Goggins says in his book. And I noticed I was like starting to, I'll be honest with you, I was slacking after one of these big successes. I was like, man, okay, I can take it easy, start sleeping in. I was sleeping until 7 a.m. I was, I wasn't skipping workouts, but I was just not doing the deep work needed. I was not reading as many books. And I read this quote: nothing fails like success. And so you got to stay hungry, and you got to say, okay, what's next? How do I keep pushing myself? And people are like, oh, you're psychotic. Why would you do all that? It's like, there's a term called blissful discontent. And I think that's it. Being really happy with your life, being blessed, but knowing that you can still keep growing and contributing more. I mean, Greg, you've done it all. You've helped it all. You've already financially successful. And now this is sort of fun for you, right?
Exactly. Watching you and your team and Ravi and all the people that I've done interviews with in this course, a lot of them starting with nothing, coming from nothing, just like me. I didn't go to college, I had no money. Nobody in my family were entrepreneurs. I started with absolutely nothing. And I know what that's given me in my life, and what I can do with that. And now helping other people just like you do in coaching. Yeah, there's just nothing else like it.
Yeah, it's fun. And you get a sense of pride. And in a way, your quote unquote legacy lives on, because part of you is with that person, part of you is with that person. And, that's the next level of growth for people. So, the moment you quote unquote have gone to your success levels, now start giving back, pay it forward, help others, each one teach one,
Yeah, deals are fun. Impact is eternal.
I love that. That's a great quote. That's a good t-shirt quote for you.
Just came up with it. Well, Vik, I appreciate you taking some time out today and sharing your journey. I think it's going to inspire a lot of people.
Thank you, Greg. Really appreciate it. And thank you for all the support and advice over all the years.